So this is our closing and way forwards session. Um, and yeah, we're so grateful that you can be with us today to close out the meeting. We've had a really rich set of sessions over the 3 days. I've seen many of you coming in and out of different sessions. So we really wanted to use this session to harness all of that learning and to see what we're going to do with it. So the annual meeting in itself is a tool for us to share knowledge from around the world, from the sector. And that's already a kind of service and an accountability measure to enhance our work. But this year we're excited to be able to actually take the work forward through our new strategic brief. So that's what we'll be doing today. We'll be reflecting a bit on the learning from the week and what it means, because this is an emerging area of our work, but also seeing what we can do next. So if we just go back to the first slide, I thought we'd start with our warm-up Menti while people kind of trickle in. So we just wanted to make sure that you've been listening over the last few days. So we had a little bit of trivia for you from one of our earlier sessions. If we can go to the Menti first, that would be great. So our question for you was, I'll wait for the Menti to come up. Um, yeah, so we had a couple of questions from the donor session we wanted to kind of reinforce. So, which two principles did Catherine Anderson of the Norwegian Monastery of Foreign Affairs say we all need to keep in mind during the humanitarian reset? Which two principles did Catherine Anderson of the Norwegian Monastery of Foreign Affairs say we need to all keep in mind during the humanitarian reset? Someone's quick to answer. Lots of people saying localization. One saying centrality of protection. I didn't actually catch if it was centrality of protection or centrality of children and their protection. I suspect the former, but it would have been great if it was the latter. Nobody's saying cost savings. Yes, I'm very glad too that she didn't say that. But I was very surprised and pleased to hear that she flagged both localization and centrality of protection as principles that I think she personally would be advocating for. I'm not sure, Hani, if you heard how formalized these principles were when she shared them, but that's certainly what she shared with us in her quick 4-minute intro to the session. All right, so if we move to the next question, we wanted to hear whether you also caught this other piece of news, which was that during the European Humanitarian Forum, ECHO announced that they would provide 25% of their funds to local actors. But when did they say this would happen by? Either 2027, 2050, or 2030. Yeah, so it's not a Kahoot. Some people are very fast. There are no prizes. But yeah, it's great to see people responding to our quick trivia Menti as we warm up the room. Yeah, so I think 2030 would have been a target that I perhaps would have expected, but I believe they did say 2027. Or certainly that's what our panel facilitator said, reported that they had committed to. So yes, that's their plan and their hope for when they'll be able to achieve um, that by. So great. Okay, well, I'm glad lots of people were paying attention. And if you missed the session, we just thought it would be good to raise awareness on that. So if we can bring the slides back up, I'll just do a little overview of the session so we all know what we've signed up for this 90 minutes. Basically, today's session, we're looking at harnessing, as I say, the all of the reflections and the learning from the meetings 3 days on our meeting theme, which is protecting children from the ground up, enhancing localized approaches in conflict and crises. And we're going to invite your reflections in a moment, as well as reflections from Faiza Hassan, who's the new director of our sister entity, Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, and we're delighted to have her with us. And then we will have a panel of others reflecting, facilitated by Yvonne Agengo, who's the global lead for child protection at the IRC. We'll then move into some group work facilitated by James Gray, who's the Senior Advisor for Child Protection at UNICEF. Also new, it's really great to have all these fresh energy in the Alliance. And so we're really looking forward to hearing from you all in those groups. And then we'll spend some time sharing some thanks and closing the meeting, and Hani will take us through that. Okay, so if we go back to our topical mentee for the session to really start these reflections off, we wanted to hear from you all. What has been your biggest learning from the 3 days? So we appreciate not everybody's been able to attend all of the sessions. You might have attended one, you might have attended 5. Many of you have been facilitating as well. Certainly for me, there's been lots of fresh ideas, lots of challenges shared. So we wanted to invite you to share in this mentee, the next set of the mentees, what your biggest learning has been. And I think we've done this as a word cloud. And this would be really useful also for our panelists to see before they share their reflections. So please just take a minute to fill in the
Sorry, Camilla, I'm just getting the mentee back.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to have lost it in my desktop.
No worries. Sorry, it's my fault for flicking back and forth.
No, it's okay.
I just wanted people to have a minute to join the room. In the meantime, people can be filling it in. So your biggest learning from the 3 days? It's a tricky question, I appreciate. The link above doesn't work.
I think the previous link works, the one from the first mentee. It's a continuation. The second link that was pasted is not working. Great.
Ah, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so the one that ends OP. Thanks, Pedro. Good. I'm glad people have some reflections. It wasn't just that you didn't have any reflections. I'm starting to worry there. Okay. So greater engagement of volunteers in the future to be considered in learning and development efforts. It's an interesting one. Perhaps from our first or second session of the week. I think that would have come up in a couple of other sessions though. Sharing resources and expertise is important more than ever. The child protection minimum standards still matter. They're our foundation and our most powerful tool. That was just in the last session we had, which was very powerful. The importance of co-creation with children and young people. Yes, that really came out in the accountability session earlier. Shifting power to local communities. CP matters even more now. What else do we have? Lots of learning around strategies to engage communities and great localization initiatives. More efforts to shift from tokenistic community-based child protection. Yes, I heard this phrase a lot, nothing for us without us, both from my young people and some of the adult speakers. The game boards were very creative. The Vancouver principles. Yes. And the importance of partnerships with youth-led LGBTQI+ movements. Great. And then I think one of the things we also really wanted to understand as we take this work forwards is what your biggest remaining question is, or what maybe, I guess, challenge you might have encountered within some of the discussions. And we really want you to be frank and open here, because we do really want to promote meaningful action and change on child protection systems, strengthening local actors and community engagement and ownership. So we'd really love you to share what your biggest remaining question is following these 3 days, to help us move forwards, because we will be developing a position paper, a policy brief, where we'll look into some of these issues, as you'll be looking at in the group work later on. Okay. So it's about the mechanism of shifting power while doing this responsibly. I think, the first one. Yeah, and some of the ways that we work with local and national actors without being paternalistic. Yeah, and so the funding session was quite important there. We heard some examples of practical partnership and positive partnership. And then the practicalities of channeling funding to local actors for both UN and INGOs. Yeah, and it is difficult to see the wood for the trees, as they say, when we're in such a constantly changing environment. Yep. Yep. How do we get funds to even quite informal groups that aren't registered? How do we secure the funding for local actors? Are intermediaries really going to change their compliance? UNHCR said that they have. They've reduced their risk levels for some partnerships. Are we going to still get the funding to be able to adapt it? How can CP become a better ally for gender transformative approaches? Yeah, lots of concerns about how we sustain our work despite the funding cuts. Okay, so hopefully that was some useful food for thought for our reflection panel. So without further ado, I'd like to hand to Faiza Hassan from INE to share her thoughts and some of the next steps that INE is going to be taking in this area. So over to you, Faiza, and Faiza's bio and all the other bios will be shared in the chat just to save time on introductions. Over to you, Faiza.
Thank you very much, Camilla. It's really good to be here today with all of you, especially at this moment where the humanitarian system is fundamentally being re-examined. Yes, it is a moment of disruption, but it can also be, I think, like everyone realizes, it's an opportunity to do things differently. It's an opportunity to push boundaries. It's an opportunity to use our platforms, our partnerships, and our influence to push for meaningful reform, not just tweaks to the existing system. I think, we need to think of alternative ways of financing that do not depend on the current aid model. Aid is a small drop in the bucket, and there are many other ways of doing things and doing the important work that we do. I think we all realize that donor-funded grants will not get us to the future that we need to get to. And so as a sister network to the Alliance, INEE is on a similar journey. And it's really interesting to listen to everyone here today and to hear some of your reflections emerging from this annual meeting, and also to see some of the questions that still remain for people. And this really connects very well with the conversations we've been having within INEE and within the wider education in emergencies space, where we've asked our membership, what is next for education in emergencies beyond aid? And the response has been really incredible. We ran a survey of the membership, and then we've gone a step further and also ran focus group discussions and, organized 5 global meetups with different language communities, 9 thematic meetups focused on specific topics like education financing, accelerated learning, gender equity. And then we've also had 21 country level meetups with teachers, with ministries of education, with students, with local organizations working in this space, really bringing together the education in emergencies, the EIE community together. We're still compiling everything. And there's, some of these, this is an ongoing dialogue. It's not just a one-off thing. But there are a few things that are coming through really clearly to us, and I think they probably resonate with you all. That is one localization that's coming over and over and over again, regardless of the context. Domestic financing and the need to unlock the barriers to domestic financing, and also building national systems. Those are 3 key themes emerging from our survey, emerging from our focus group discussions and our meetups at both country, regional, and global levels. And what we are also seeing is a real look inwards and a focus on existing assets, on networks, on leaderships already in place, and local EIE entities really coming together to talk to one another. We're seeing in some contexts local organizations mobilizing volunteers to sustain education and protection services in the middle of the disruption that has happened because of the funding cuts. We're seeing in other locations national and local actors coming together to work with ministries of education to talk about how can we transition EIE schools into national systems and what a pathway might look like. And so across the board, I think these three things are coming out: localization, unlocking domestic financing, building national systems, advocating with national governments, and also mobilizing local communities. And so where do we go from here? At INEE, I mean, we're a sister network to the Alliance. We're 100% committed to support the shift that's happening on the ground. We're 100% committed to document and amplify that shift. We're committed to continue creating the space to connect across borders, to connect across sectors, the space to, analyze jointly, to learn jointly, and to adapt together. And really have that space. We need to build solidarity across borders. We're also hoping to double down on investing in specialized local technical knowledge and expanding that on the ground. And like I said, we're committed to pushing meaningful reform and not just tweaks to the system. I think us in the Alliance, we're partners, we're co-conveners, we're part of this wider movement pushing for truly locally led change. And I look forward to continue this work together. I'll stop there, Camilla. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Faiza, for your leadership in this area. It's really great to hear the extensive listening and dialogue that you've been leading and engaging in, and that you've been so open to change. And it's really heartening to hear that you're 100% committed to taking this forward and using everything that you've kind of gathered. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand to Yvonne Agengo, the Global Practice Lead for Child Protection from IRC, to take us through a reflections panel. We have a slide if you'd like to use it to introduce the speakers.
Thank you so much, Camilla, and good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm really, really happy to be part of this reflection panel. It's really a reflection from the 3 days, and I must say congratulations on making it to day 3. It's not easy being online and everything else happening around, so people are stretched, with the funding cuts, and so congratulations that we're all here today. I'm just going to start by reflecting on the last slide we saw from the Mentee, the questions that people still have. And to me, that is really a sign that we are all here because we care about the protection of children in humanitarian action. And to achieve that goal, together, we must all contribute and use each other's contribution to build from the ground up. The theme for this year, I think, is really bringing that home, right? Building from the ground up. We heard from day 1, children already doing the work in their communities. And I think we can better learn, document, and listen. If we listen to what the children are already doing, document and learn, I think we can be able to better acknowledge that leadership of children in practice because it's already happening. National actors shared about their partnerships with international actors on how to enhance their protection work. And I think the key word there is to enhance. Because all this is already happening, building from the ground up is a sign that already things are happening in the community. So it's not about shifting power to start, but really enhancing what is already happening in the different communities where we work. And all of us as Alliance members have a role to play. Sometimes the role we play is different. Sometimes the roles we play is similar, but all is for the outcome of the protection of children. I'm really energized after these 3 days, and I hope you too are energized. And so I'm going to invite our panelists to share their reflections. I hope these reflections will give you some ideas to commit to or things to reinforce in your everyday practice. I will start with our 2 youth speakers who are passionate about advocating for rights of children in their communities. This is Janada and Hanadi from Nigeria and Ethiopia. Janada facilitated the youth panel on day one for those who joined us for the opening session, and Hanadi was one of the speakers. Over to you. Well, we'll start with Janada. Over to you to share your reflections, and I invite you all to listen and learn from what she's going to share with us.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Greetings to you all. I count it a privilege to speak here today to amplify the voices of children and young people, not only from my country, but from different regions across the world, faced with one challenge or the other. Attending different sessions during the event has enlightened me of the importance to strengthen the capacity of communities to ensure child protection, especially marginalized communities affected by conflict. Again, I have learned that it is important to support the efforts of humanitarian actors, as it is a collective responsibility for all. As we close this Alliance meeting today, it is important to ensure that the voices of children and young people count, especially as we voice out our needs. Our call to action is localization. Grants and support to local NGOs in our communities as they are closer to us, and especially for sustainability. There should be resource mobilization to local actions, especially for children with special needs and young persons living with disability. A lot of children, especially in violent contexts, are being recruited to armed groups. We call on interventions to prevent this and also ensure that such children are treated as primarily survivors. And finally, let the rights of children be respected and protected. We cannot afford to keep relying on the quote that says, children are the leaders of tomorrow. Let it start from the present for an assured future. And speaking here today as a young person gives me a beam of hope that a better and just world is possible. Thank you very much.
Excellent points. Thank you so much, Janada. I'll immediately go to Hanadi to share her reflections and call for action. Over to you, Hanadi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Janada, for the powerful speech. Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. I hope everybody's having a good evening or a good day. I'm proud to speak here, not just for myself, but for all of us, the young people and the children affected by crisis. During this meeting, we shared what we already know. We talked about how child protection must include mental health, how young people are already doing important work in our communities, and how protection is only strong when children and communities are only included. These are not things we learned this week. These are things we live in our everyday lives. But we also gained something important. I saw that people in many countries are facing similar problems, and they are finding smart, strong, and caring ways to respond. What I take from this meeting is power of connection. We can do more when we listen to each other and work together. So here's our call to action. First, keep supporting local leaders. Trust the people who are closest to us, who are closest to the children and the youth, not just in emergencies, but in the long term. Second is support young people as real partners. We are not waiting for the future. We are already part of the work. We are already the leaders, and we just need space, support, and respect. This meeting is ending, but hopefully the work continues, and we are ready to keep going with hope, with care, and with each other. Thank you, everyone, very, very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hanadi, for these points. Janada and Hanadi, I feel like you've taken the strategic brief that you have and just summarized it in a way that is simple, digestible, and practical. I hope you'll be here for the group work session, because I think it might be interesting to hear whether you think your words and your call of action is reflected in our strategy, because we're here to do child protection work. And if it's not, if your voice is not reflected, then what's the point, right? So I really hope that you can give us that feedback and we can listen to you. I will now invite Kamila from ECHO, who is responsible for development and implementation of policies, of ECHO policies and strategies. Kamila, would like to hear your thoughts. If you could share with us what we could be doing better at an interagency level. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. And first of all, congratulations on this very important meeting that is a mobilization of efforts, expertise, advocacy at a very critical moment for the protection of children. And thanks to Jonathan and Hani, because their messages were super powerful. And I think that gives us already the first point. We need to ensure that our commitment to centrality of child protection continues to stand out very, very clearly and very loudly. We need to speak with one voice, honor our commitments, and also be very clear about our responsibilities. My second point is on coordination, and this resonates very much from what I saw in the Mentimeter. We are not here about defending structures, but about defending the critical coordination functions that allow us, all of us, to effectively address children's needs. So we know that business as usual is not an option. We need to look critically at the resources we have for the needs to address and to work collectively. So probably now is the time for all partners to support each other in this endeavor. And because we have these conferences to learn from each other, could we not consider a little bit more pragmatic and operational way of sharing expertise the same way locally? From our perspective as a donor, we will definitely continue advocating for safeguarding capacities for child protection, including in these new models of coordination in area-based, multi-sectoral, inclusive coordination at subnational levels. My third point is on intersectorality, and I've heard that very much during the sessions that I was able to attend, that we need to support children's needs in a comprehensive and holistic way, and to do it more and better and to combat the sectoral silos. So it is really now the time to act on that. And I've heard a lot about localization. I think that resonates very well with the ECHO commitment. It is indeed 2027, the end of 2027, which is aligning with our funding cycles. But for us, it is critical that this localization, this shift to localization is done really responsibly with corresponding resources, safeguards, and capacities. And I will end up with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Camilla. And it's really important to hear the reassurance of the centrality of protection, your commitment to ensure that space for protection and dedicated, of course, resources to ensure that this multi-sectoral or different needs of children are incorporated in every response. Alaa, I'm going to then invite you to share your reflections. Everyone has talked about, every of the speakers in this reflection session has talked about localization, national actors. And so I invite your reflections as a national actor who's worked extensively in different contexts to tell us what you think we need to do to ensure a localized approach is incorporated practically. What should this look like and what does it mean to you?
Thank you, Yvonne. I think I'm glad that everyone is talking about localization. And I think Faiza put it really well when she mentioned the three priorities, localization, domestic financing, and national systems. And I'll unpack this a little bit for a context like Syria. What I would encourage actors to do in a context similar to Syria, and I think this could apply to any of the humanitarian context, is when you think about localization, start by asking the question on what is the right local level? Because that's definitely not an easy answer to say it's the NGO or the local actors. And that is linked to what Faiza was saying about we already have existing access and networks and groups that we probably ignored in the past, and we need to relook at that right level. And I'll give you 3 signs of finding that right level in a context like Syria. If we work with a group that is representative of people in need or children in need, and they are specialized in that kind of representation, and they are good governed, and they are independent, then you're really working with the right level that can make change in Syria in terms of influencing policy, in terms of building systems. Linked to that, I also think I would encourage you when approaching a context like Syria, where we're literally rebuilding systems from scratch after 50 years of dictatorship. There's a lot of empathy for children. There's a lot of high hopes for the future. And I encourage you to think systems, to think about not just our part from a kind of a supply-demand way of thinking, but also in terms of engaging with local systems and rebuilding them. And I'll give you an example. So there are so many different priorities now in Syria. And recently there was a constitutional declaration, and child protection was one of them, because people really want to see, when they think about children, they think about the future. And that's an opportunity for all of us. Because of that interest, because of that opportunity of rethinking how systems should be built, we have a chance to rebuild these systems together. So I think to localize child protection effectively, especially in fragile and rapidly shifting contexts, we must invest in institutional capacity. We must not just focus on project delivery, but also think about and create space for us to, what I would say, fall in love with the problem first. Try to think about the root causes of why things are happening and how can we rebuild these systems and how can we create space for the people to find solutions to these problems. They don't have to be our problems. And that's another sign. If your effort is going to work, then the problem we're trying to solve must be the problem that the communities we're serving are also thinking about as a priority. And I really hope, as this meeting concludes, that we shouldn't just focus on surviving the funding crisis, but to see this as an opportunity to reimagine a way where systems protect children better and more justly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alaa. I'm going to invite Riing. I'm checking if he's here with us and on video, hence the pause. If we can spotlight Riing, if he's here with us, so that he can also share. Perfect. Welcome, Riing. If you can share your views on how Riing is joining us from South Sudan and also representing his perspectives. If you can share with us your perspectives about what we need to practically do to ensure localized approaches for national actors. Over to you, Riing.
Thank you very much, Agengo. Actually, mine is not going to be very far from what my colleagues mentioned, but actually I will focus on the capacity strengthening of local actors, especially the caregivers, the frontline workers, the local NGOs and local community, local authorities. Because, when there is crisis, for example, in South Sudan, we have a lot of intertwined crises. We have climate change crisis. We have conflicts, from place to place, intercommunal conflicts. So children actually are the ones suffering. So if we strengthen the capacity of local structures, especially the child protection community-based structures, and then also we involve, the local authorities, especially like social workers in the line ministries of social work, social administration, gender, child, and social welfare, and then also the local actors who are doing child protection. And I think the needs of children will be met in a very effective way. But let me not also forget to touch the area of locally led funding mechanisms, basing on the local resources that we have. Whether human resource, financial resource, and this will actually make our response very easy when there's crisis. And we will support those children who are in remote areas and also in very, unstable environment and also locations in South Sudan. And the other thing also is to create together with the local communities that I mentioned, and also with children, projects, programs and, interventions that reflect, the needs and interests of children. the local leadership is very important to be strengthened, and also the caregivers, especially parents. And actually, let me not forget, the issue of climate change, which we have also incorporated in some of our activities, creating awareness in the communities, especially the flood-affected areas like Unity State, where what is called a comprehensive school safety framework, and that one actually was derived from the Global Alliance for Disaster Risk Reduction in Education Sector and Resilience. And that one actually is a very important policy that we use, to create awareness in schools, and also among the communities and among the children themselves, because that's what we adapted actually to our context. I will stop from here. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Riing, and thank you to all the panelists. I think we don't have time to come back to another round of reflections, but I think and I hope that as you're listening to the reflections that we had from Hanadi, from Janada, really, I think there's no way I can summarize, and I hope if you can share your words and we can post them or use them as a reminder. I would definitely love to have that as a daily reminder of what we need to do to really listen and action what children are asking us to do. Thank you so much, Camilla, for your reflections from the donor side. We definitely do depend on allies in the donor space to help us be able to advance the work we're doing. Alaa, thank you for telling us that Syria is a context where we are rebuilding and there's a lot of hope. And we need to see what is a problem you are trying to solve for us to be able to contribute to that meaningfully. And of course, Riing sharing with us a protracted situation and how we need to work with the systems to make something that is sustainable. So all this is, I think, leading us really well into our strategic brief to see if we are going to take these reflections and recommendations into practice and how we can incorporate that in our strategic brief. Thank you so much, and over to you, Camilla.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, and to all the panelists. I think Yvonne's already set us up quite well to know where we're moving to now, which is the strategic brief. But I just had a quick slide to kind of help set this up before I hand to James to share his own reflections and take us into the group work. So just to make sure you're following where we're going with all of this, we're moving from the meeting theme, which is the picture of our background paper on the left here, protecting children from the ground up, enhancing localised approaches in conflict and crises. And we're now looking at how we take all of this learning and reflection into the implementation of our strategic brief, which is on the right here, where we have within priority 3 this objective on promoting meaningful investments in child protection systems, including national and local actors, to enable continuity of high quality child protection in the rapidly evolving humanitarian landscape. So James is going to take us through, so I won't say any more. I will just hand over to James Gray, who is the incoming Senior Advisor for Child Protection from UNICEF HQ. We're really delighted to have you as part of the Alliance, James. Warmest welcome, and we're very happy to have you here for this session today as well. So if we move to the next slide for James.
Thank you, Camilla, and it's lovely to be here. Great to be here with everyone. Nice to see you. I wanted to reflect a bit around this objective then, and the meeting over the past few days. I think this meeting has really allowed us the space to take a fresh look at the localization agenda and the need to move towards a more meaningful and responsible transfer of power to local and national and community actors, as well as governments where appropriate. I know it's an incredibly challenging situation everyone is going through, and as has been noted over the past few days and also by the past few speakers, it's important that we try and view the situation as a catalyst for localization. And there's a real need to create space for local actors to promote investments that will ensure the continuation of child protection, including community-owned child protection initiatives, enhancing local systems and leadership for sustainability, and also importantly, engaging children and communities throughout project cycles to foster accountability. It's apparent the impact of this crisis on our sector, on the child protection sector, and it's come up, of course, over the past few days, many times in many different sessions. We clearly haven't resolved or solved the problems, the crisis, the issues our sector is facing, but I think it's been really important hearing these reflections and really helpful to understand the many streams of work that are ongoing to preserve what matters most to us. And that is a space as the Alliance for concerned actors to continue protecting children amidst conflict and crisis. It's been encouraging, especially to know that our colleagues, so all of you, you're continuing to maintain the spirit of activism to fight to keep children and their protection on the humanitarian agenda for policymakers, for senior leaders, and for donors. And equally, it's been really encouraging to see how we are thinking and planning for continuing to provide high quality child protection in this new and very, very rapidly evolving landscape. So turning to the group work, and given these changes we're seeing in the child protection sector and the humanitarian sector, and in line with that third priority of the strategic brief, would like to use this last group work session for some collective thinking and to hear from you on the objective around promoting meaningful investments in child protection systems, including the national and local actors, to enable continuity of high quality child protection in the evolving humanitarian landscape. So for this session, this last group work session, we're going to put you all into one of 6 groups. 2 will be on evidence, 2 will be on policy, and 2 will be on implementation. And with the help of your group's facilitators, and they will explain the task in detail, we will ask you to work on a document and answer a series of questions. So the first group, as I mentioned, will look at evidence, and this is the evidence needed to promote meaningful investments in child protection systems and actors in humanitarian settings. The second will think about policy on strengthened child protection systems and actors in humanitarian settings. And the third will look at policy implementation. So each group will have 25 minutes to discuss the series of questions, and then we will reconvene for a further 10 to 15 minutes to report back. So given you know, how little time we have to report back, and also recognizing it's the end of what has been a long day for many of you and a long few days, we need to keep the reporting back very focused, very succinct, and really action focused. So each group will just have 1 or 2 minutes. Great. Okay. I hope you all had a good breakout session, and now we are going to reconvene and hear back what each group shared. So the first group then, we will have 2 minutes from the evidence 1 group, and then evidence 2 will have 1 minute to add any additional points that have not been covered by the first evidence 1 group, and then we will repeat this formula for the policy and implementation groups, and then I will quickly summarize and reflect. So given we are, you know, quite short on time, asking that each group is very succinct and action focused, and I will keep every group to time. So evidence 1, over to you, please.
This is Roslyn. I'll just go quickly and share what we came up with on the very first question from evidence. What does success look like? And we thought of issues like having sufficient time, having sufficient time and proper resources, because sometimes the challenge is just lack of time for the organizations to be able to prepare the locals, having locally driven initiatives so that we can share with the donors, because once the locals own the initiatives, they can run with it with the support either with the donors and partners. including children from the beginning, so that we know what they want and they can contribute to the same. So child inclusion or participation. And then just having reflections on the support so that we can provide local participants what they need and what is realistic, not from our own perspective. If I speak to the second question, what conditions allow for successful power shifts? And we still go to the aspect of time to properly train and coach partners so that they come up with approaches that are effective and operational. Funding, we need sufficient funding to be able to do that, because sometimes it takes time and needs really to be implemented. And then the willingness to shift powers so that we want to transfer, and we be willing to transfer that powers to the locals and share with them. But also leveraging on local funding for sustainability so that the programs don't go off once we have left. Having the right staff and support, especially to be able to coach the local partners. Multi-sectoral participation, where still within the local sectors and the partners, that will really be helpful. On the third question, how can we track how the role of local actors is changing? And we picked issues like need for robust M&E systems that can be able to monitor that, organized global discussion with the partners, and that will be very helpful. Set clear indicators right from the beginning, and then be able to monitor progress. Regular webinars with the local actors, and this could be, we can have physically organized face-to-face within the location, but also online webinars to be very meaningful. And then on the last question, what kinds of evidence is needed? And I just summarize quickly: data-driven, so that we have facts from the field. Children's voices, especially in the responses we get, we need to hear their voices and what they are saying, what they need. Changes in policies of donors and others towards positioning child protection is very significant. Shared communities-led outcomes, what has been done, and so can we share that evidence for scaling up? Evidence-based reports that actually would be more meaningful. There was a question which we were asked if we had time, and we picked out the need.
Okay. We will have to move on, Rosalind. Thank you very much, and you did a fantastic job summarizing. Sorry to rush you, but hopefully the second group, so evidence 2, can step in now with a quick summary. Anything in addition, so not repeating anything in addition to what Rosalind just said.
Specifically on question 2 regarding what conditions would allow for successful power shifts, there was a strong recommendation to really strengthen community-based dialogue structures, to make sure that young people are included in discussions, which was also mentioned. Then there was a bit of a discussion around the challenge with the power imbalance when one entity is in charge of providing resources to another. So we talked about the importance of sensitizing staff in positions of power to be more mindful about the power dynamics when they're implementing this kind of work, to help shift those dynamics. We also discussed the risk aversion of INGOs and the UN to taking risks with funding local partnerships, and how this is, and this keeps coming up, I think, during these meetings, about how this is a barrier to new partnerships. And then lastly, the importance of facilitating and providing budgets and space for local partners and local actors to publicize their work and help them leverage further funds. So those are the things we can complement with.
Hello?
Sorry. Yes, I was muted. Thank you very much, Sarah. And that was very succinct as well.
Are you getting me?
Okay. We will move to the second group now. So this is the policy group 1. So over to policy group 1, please.
Michael, will you go ahead?
Kenna, please go ahead. The one who was taking the record.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much, Michael, and everyone in the group. So it was a great discussion, although short time. But the main takeaways in terms of who should we be included, definitely in addition to government, children, it was mentioned non-child protection actors in order to break the silence, but also to make the policy as holistic as possible and as targeted as possible, community-based child protection actors, as well as private sectors. And for the private sectors was also discussed the fact of getting a win with them, not just making them part of the discussion, but also benefiting on the services that they are offering for children. In terms of who should and the ways how, it was throughout a collaborative approach from the get-go, but also keeping in mind their individual respective priorities, as well as their language. Who should the policy target? Always an agreement on the governments, donors, but also depending on the topic, definitely private sectors and policymakers and decision makers, and making it a bit more targeted and specific to the ones that actually take the decision for that particular policy. In terms of what would be an impactful policy brief, the content, there was a kind of a theme that emerged regarding to pushing for budget allocation, but in terms of context, what needs to be included, data evidence, of course, the language as simple as possible, really targeted and focused, making it specific on what we would like from them to take it away. To take action, and definitely specifying the input from children there, demonstrating why it is worth investment, showcase on accompanying it with case studies on the positive impact, but also what happens in case this policy doesn't change. I think we kind of started the point 4 a bit on attitude change, but then we couldn't move more forward than that. That's over.
Great. Thank you very much, Kenna. Thank you. And we will move then to the policy group number 2 to add on to anything there.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kenna and team. It's great to hear that you your overview. I think in terms of who to be consulted, we have pretty much the same, but we didn't include the private sector. So it's great to hear that reflection from your side, actually. I'd love to hear more about that. Anyway, and in general, what the brief would look like. Well, this is quite interesting because when we were talking about actors, and we actually looked at many of the, in terms of targets, many of our targets were the same: humanitarian decision makers, policy makers. We looked a little bit about internally within our own organizations as well, governments, local authorities. We kind of realized that it's a very diverse audience and it might not be a one size fits all. So not to overcomplicate our work, but we also explored the fact that we might need different ways of communicating, different styles of the brief or different means of communication in order to relay kind of the messages from a core policy brief, I think was where we were getting to. And we also flagged that, of course, we are in the middle of this funding crisis, but it's also really important that we look beyond just the financial elements, but also the importance of long-term investments on capacity, etc. So I think this is sort of the road that we were going down in terms of the format. Eleanor and group, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that.
Thank you very much, Elspeth. And we will move then to the final group, or the final 2 groups. So this is the implementation. So implementation group 1, over to you, please.
Thank you, James. And thank you to all the people in the group and Kat for taking the notes. So there were many thoughts around who we need to be working with and working with more. And I think one of the main points made was that there should be meaningful participation and not looking to just work with groups that are marginalized or representative organizations, but to ensure that they have ownership of child protection responses and that their participation is as meaningful as possible. I think we also discussed the importance to continue working with parents, caregivers, community leaders, faith-based leaders, in order to strengthen local child protection systems. And then there was also, I think, points raised around longer term capacity strengthening of local systems and stakeholders such as social workers. In terms of what specific actions we could be taking around enhancing child protection mechanisms, we talked about developing or investing in more interactive, engaging, play-based models for children. And finally, I think there was also a consensus around bridging the humanitarian and development gap and calling for more coordinated and collaborative initiatives between development and humanitarian actors so that we can achieve better child protection outcomes.
Perfect. Thank you, and very succinct. Thank you, Usha. So over to implementation group 2, please.
Thank you very much. So we'll skip some of the points that our colleagues have already highlighted. So on the first part, we were looking at some of those actors that we can engage outside child protection and humanitarian action. So we already mapped all the clusters, though it has been mentioned, but specifically education, nutrition, health, and food. We were also looking at women-led organizations, refugee networks, as we had, some of them were participating here. Also, we have youth-led organizations and also government line ministries at different levels. And then also one of the recommendations that came out is mapping stakeholders not currently engaged and ensure that local decision makers are empowered, not NGOs coming with something or hidden agenda. So that mapping is really key. It's one of the recommendations. Others were, for example, CEOs of minority groups that can also be targeted, organizations that are led by persons living with disability. So those are some of those that we were able to map, not leaving out the local organizations that are leading community level approaches. And then we were also able to look at some of the tools that we need as CP actors. One of the recommendations is we need very easy tools. That was really emphasized. And then also we already have integration of child protection and into other sectors, which is one of the key strategies that we have that will enable us to work not only to not work inside silos, and also advocating with donors for long-term funding. So those are some of the things that we mentioned.
Great.
And lastly, one
Thank
of
you.
the recommendation. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion. And sorry to cut you off there, but just in the interest of time, I wanted to quickly summarize before we move on. Some really interesting and important points there, and I think beyond just the technical side of child protection programming, I wanted to touch on willingness, and that was mentioned by the first group. There needs to be a willingness if we're going to invest in child protection systems to shift power to local actors, and we need to be open to that, and we need to allow for meaningful partnerships, and that also came up in the implementation group. So meaningfulness and willingness, also addressing these power imbalances and recognizing the realities of often how we partner and how we work. And providing the space to our partners, providing capacity to local organizations. Working with and beyond and thinking beyond the child protection box, so engaging the private sector and see what they can bring to the table and what we can benefit and learn from them. I think it's important to be creative and to be innovative. And in terms of communicating and the policy being targeted, being specific, being practical, that really came up. Being simple, making others understand what we're saying so that we can influence, and looking beyond just the financial elements. And then lastly, I think, again, the other theme, look, beyond just our own sector is bridging humanitarian development gaps and working beyond just the child protection sector, seeing who else is out there and not just looking to our traditional partners. So some really interesting inputs, and thank you everyone for that. I think the past few days and today have really provided that opportunity to reflect and to take a pause in this very sort of unstable situation, and to think a bit more creatively perhaps as well how we work going forward. Before I hand it over to Hani, I just wanted to also thank you on behalf of the steering committee of the Alliance, and to thank also the Secretariat team, the broader Alliance community, who have brought all of this together. And I know it's been a real challenge, especially in light of these major reductions in resources. And all of the past few days has been produced in-house. So we've not brought in or hired additional organizations for this, but it's all been the skills and the time and the capacity of the team. So I just wanted to recognize that and say that. And I think it's been pulled together fantastically and has really surpassed the expectations, all of our expectations. So thank you very much. And I will hand over to Hani now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, James, for that wrap up, and also the recognition of the team, which I'll also come back to after a few other remarks that I had in mind. Thank you for your presence, everyone. We know how busy everyone is, particularly in these times when resources are more limited. Everyone's work has doubled, tripled, quadrupled. So really, this means a lot for us, for you to dedicate this time to be with us, which shows and reiterates your commitment to working as a collective to protect children. When I was reading the news about Gaza the last couple of days, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the recent wave of events in Gaza. I was wondering, how can the humanitarian leadership watch this and still suggest that saving lives is the only business of humanitarians? Isn't upholding the dignity and protecting the rights of these children and families equally important? Just like Janada just told us a bit ago, we need to ensure the rights of children are respected and protected. Isn't the fact that children and families in Gaza are losing the last asset that they have, which is their hope? Isn't this equally important to creating a place for them to sleep at night? All of this made me realize that no one, I mean, even Mr. Tom Fletcher himself, cannot convince me that humanitarian aid is only about survival. Protection must be a non-negotiable element of humanitarian action. Therefore, before I go into my final remarks, I just wanted to invite everyone to observe a 20-second silence. I don't know if there's some background noise there. A 20-second silence in the honor of children in Gaza, in Sudan, in South Sudan, in Myanmar, in Yemen, in Colombia, Syria, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Burkina Faso, and many more crises, where not only their survival is in danger, but also their dignity, development, and future. And yet they remain resilient, and many of them become advocates for peace and harmony. Let's just observe 20 seconds of silence, and then I'll come back to you. Great. Back to our meeting. Over the course of the meeting, we have heard sobering truths and urgent calls for action. We also heard about learning from practice, from practitioners who are innovative as much as they're committed and dedicated. We heard about examples of joint action to maximize impact and minimize cost. We have also heard something else, something more enduring, the deep resolve of a sector that refuses to give up on children, even when the systems around us begin to falter. Let me leave you with 3 reflections. First, localization is not a future aspiration, it is a present necessity, and it is long overdue. We have seen again and again that local actors are the first to respond and the last one to stay when everyone else has left. whether in Haiti, Mali, or Myanmar, it is the local caseworkers, local organizations, and community leaders who are holding the line, not as an act of charity, but of agency, expertise, and commitment. If you're serious about protecting children, we must stop asking local actors to do more with less and start shifting resources, trust, and decision-making power into their hands. One key comment I wanted to add to all the discussions that we have had about localization is a cautionary note that we should be careful not to use our usual colonial framework for localization. I heard many calls for building the capacity of national actors so that they can access funds. To me, that sounds like we are telling local and national actors to change so that they can fit our approaches to funding. Maybe bilateral and multilateral donors, as well as NGOs, need to be more self-reflective and look at how they can change their systems to fit the local reality. How can we enable, facilitate, open up space rather than merely employing local national actors to be implementing partners? The second thought is on the funding crisis. This funding crisis is real and it is reshaping our sector. Major donors are pulling back. Program closures are no longer hypothetical. They're a daily reality. We already heard the impact through some of the presentations. And once again, child protection is being pushed to the margins. But we must be clear, this is not a crisis of ideas. This is a crisis of political will. We cannot allow children's protection to be treated as a luxury or as something we get to if we have the resources left over. Protection is critical to survival and has to remain an essential part of humanitarian action, period. If we let the child protection sector shrink now, we will be reckoning with the consequences for generations to come. And the third element is solidarity is our strength. In a fractured landscape, what we build together matters more than ever. Solidarity is not just about statements and slogans. It is about how we act, how we share resources, how we make space, how we speak with, not for, those on the front lines. It is about refusing to let one child protection worker, one local partner, one community face this alone. So as we close, let's remember children do not experience crises in silos, and they cannot afford for us to respond in silos either. Our unity across sectors, agencies, languages, and lived experiences is what makes protection possible. And last but not least, I want to thank everyone who has made this possible. James already started this, but I wanted to make sure that we all know that there was a large number of people behind making this happen, from Secretariat and task team members, Faith, Mara, Kira, Elspeth, Manami, Pedro, Helene, Acheng, Elena, Susanna, Rosaline, Faith, Michael, Joy, Sanjana, Usha, to child and youth participation colleagues that supported that, Marion and Hawa, facilitators, lots of them. I won't read the names. You can see them on the screen. Donors that have made this possible, interpretation crew, and abstract reviewers who really supported and made our annual meeting possible. We have had over 500 unique users join across the first 2 days. We haven't yet tallied for the third day. I assume it will be even larger. Thank you, everyone. And a very special thanks to Camilla, who has been in the lead of all of this. So I just wanted to invite everyone to give a round of applause for Camilla first and everyone else who made this possible. Thank you, everyone. And with that, we wrap the 10th annual meeting of the Alliance for Child Protection in Humanitarian Action.